All right, welcome everybody. We'll take just a brief moment to focus on purifying the mind. So you may want to close your eyes and just relax a little bit. We think about those things that might be hindrances to meditation and to the further practice. And sometimes those things are derivatives of greed. Sometimes they're derivatives of ill will or hatred, and then sometimes they're derivatives of delusion. So it's helpful to just check in with ourselves, see what it is we're carrying tonight that we may do better by putting these things down. Just focusing on our practice for an hour and a half, letting go, returning to all those things in a short time, to pick them up again and embrace them with a mind that is filled with wisdom and peace, serenity. So with that in mind, I invite you to think about those things that you want to let go of. Think of those positive states that you'd like to cultivate, and I'll sound the bell. And then we'll also invite peace. Let there be peace. Let there be peace. Let there be peace. Welcome, everybody. Glad to see you all here. What a wonderful group. We'll move into our meditation together, guided meditation. So if you want to take a minute to get comfortable in whatever way that would be. Mitch, in that closet, if there's anything you'd like to use for comfort, there's yoga mats and bolsters and yoga blocks and things like that. You sure can. You sure can. Pardon?
No suffering, you said greed or hatred.
Greed, ill will, and delusion are typically the three. Yeah, which are kind of the root, the root poisons.
Do this too long, but this is.
Yeah. So if everybody's comfortable for now, and remember, if we get a few minutes into it and you need to move, that's okay. Don't worry about holding still the whole time and being like a statue. Just tend to your body if you need to, so that you can be comfortable. So with that, I'm going to sound the meditation bell, and I will guide us through the practice. Follow the sound of the bell. Follow it as it fades into silence. And let that silence be an invitation to turn your senses inward, to become aware of the sense of presence that you have in your own body, in your own mind. Letting go of the habit of the mind, which is to be engaged with the outside world, and instead just turning inward, and in a very peaceful, very stable way, just establishing that presence of being here. Let your body be symmetrical. Allow obvious conflict to leave the body. Let the eyes be closed softly, the back straight but not rigid. Let the breath be natural, not manipulated in any way. And now, with this sense of presence, this sense of awareness established, let's all bring our awareness up to the top of the head and to the area of the scalp. And with awareness in the scalp, just open up to any physical sensations that you notice. Just focus here and give it a little time. You might notice sensations of temperature, feeling of warmth or coolness in the room or in your body. Sometimes there are sensations of air movement. You detect the air movement in the room, feel that on the scalp or the hair. Sometimes there are sensations on the surface of the skin of the scalp, just a little tickle or an itch, pulsation. So we open up awareness to these sensations and we just observe as they arise and they pass away. We notice how they only become a reality for us when we focus our attention on them. And at that time, they become something that we experience. And as you're observing the scalp and the sensations in the scalp, if you happen to notice any tension, just allow that to leave the body. There is often tension in the scalp, so we can just let it go. We find ourselves feeling just a little more free and relaxed after releasing it. And then we can continue to observe the sensations in the scalp. Now, from the scalp, we can begin to move our awareness downward into the forehead. Feel the awareness moving. Sometimes you'll notice it as a warm, subtle flow, moving down through the forehead, moving into the temples, passing down through the eyebrows and into the eyes. Just observing the sensations. Again, anytime we bring awareness to a part of the body, we can open up to the sensations and just observe them with objectivity. Observe them as they arise and last for a few moments and pass away. And again, those sensations are usually around temperature awareness, around air movement, and around sensations on the surface of the skin. Just little tickles and itches and pulsations, so we observe. And if there's tension in any of these areas, maybe your brow is furrowed a little bit, or your temples are tight, or sometimes the eyes are squinted. So we look for these places of tension and we let the tension go. Each time we do that, we feel an increase in the peacefulness and stability of the body and the mind. Now from the temples, we can guide our awareness downward into the ears. Just feel it flowing downward. And then from the ears, feel as awareness flows forward into the face, passing through the cheekbones. And then at the same time, awareness moves from the eyes downward, passing through the nose, then down through the lips and mouth and chin. So we're bringing this objective quality of awareness to all these parts of the body and just noticing the sensations, whatever shows up. And again, objectivity is something we're cultivating here. As sensations become known, we're not judging them as good or bad or right or wrong. We're just noticing what they are, their characteristics, and observing for however long they last, watching as they disappear. And if there's tension in any areas of the face, commonly in the jaws, I often find tension in my jaws, or sometimes the lips are pursed. There could be tightness anywhere in the face, and we just let that go. Every time we discover tension in the body, we just release it very simply, very calmly. We're not making an enemy of tension or trying to force it out in any way. We're just noticing it, and this awareness allows us to let it leave the body. So just a very peaceful, very subtle process. And now from the chin, we can move our awareness downward into the neck. Feel it as it moves through the throat and the front of the neck, and then through the sides and back of the neck. Again, just the sensations from the neck, looking for tension, letting that go, and then moving awareness downward again into the shoulders. And spread the awareness out through the shoulders, noticing the sensations. And here, if you're leaning against a chair or laying on the floor, you might notice a sensation of contact between your shoulders and the surface. Sometimes there's a sensation of contact between your skin and your clothing. So we're just opening up to ever more subtle levels of sensation. We're not judging, but we're observing them with curiosity, with an attentive mind. And then, as always, we are releasing tension in the body as we discover it. So if the shoulders are shrugged, we just let them drop. We let the tension leave the body, and sometimes we smile as we do that, just knowing that we're setting ourselves free, creating an ever more peaceful and stable body, an ever more quiet and wisdom-filled mind. And from the shoulders now, we let the awareness drop down into the upper arms. We observe the different parts of the upper arms, the biceps, and then moving inward to the inside surface of the upper arms, just observing here. We focus on these different parts because even though they're all part of the upper arm, each one has slightly different sensations. So we're becoming aware, releasing tension as we move, observing the triceps, moving to the outward surface of the upper arms, observing from the shoulders all the way down to the elbows. So each of these parts we're just observing and letting go, observing, letting go. Feel your awareness flowing now through the elbows. Feel it flowing downward further through the forearms, making its way slowly down toward the wrists, observing that subtle flow of awareness, that warm, pleasant feeling, and then moving through the wrists into the hands, observing the heels and palms of the hands. Perhaps there's perspiration here. Moving awareness to the tops of the hands, the fingers and thumbs, and then finally guiding that awareness down into the fingertips and the fingernails. Where here we can be attentively aware and just notice the most subtle sensations in the fingernails. Sometimes just a feeling of pulsation or vibration, some sort of energy, observing, being aware, not judging. And then from the fingertips, we'll make a move with our awareness, this time up to the top of the chest, up to the collarbones, kind of spreading across the collarbones, and then guide the awareness downward through the chest. So feel it as it moves through the tissues and muscles of the chest, all the way down to the base of the sternum. And then once it's in the sternum, feel as it moves outward through the rib cage. Again, stay with the sensations and continue to observe tension so that you can release it. And now from the rib cage, we'll bring the awareness up to the underarms. And here we'll observe temperature, moisture. Let the awareness move from the underarms down through the sides of the body, all the way down to the waist, just observing. And every time you discover tension, you meet it with a very gentle release, not driving it out, not generating any animosity, just release. And from the waist now, we can bring awareness forward into the belly. And just observe as the belly rises and falls with the incoming and outgoing breath. Observe the expansion and contraction of the belly. Observe the tension that might be in the belly. If there's any tension, just release it. Let the belly be free and relaxed, completely at ease. And then from the belly, we'll move our awareness once again. We'll make a move around to the top of the back, starting at the base of the neck. And then we'll move down through the upper third of the back, passing awareness through the shoulder blades, just observing the sensations, remaining objective, moving down through the middle third of the back now. Same process. And then moving down through the lower third of the back, observing and remaining objective. Sometimes as we practice this way, in areas like the back or in other parts of the body, we'll encounter sensations that are perhaps unpleasant or difficult. And we notice that in these cases it can be difficult to let go of tension. It can also be difficult to remain objective and not judge the difficult sensations as bad or unwanted or wrong. But one thing we can become aware of as we observe is that we have this tremendous expansiveness of awareness. And this awareness is so vast, so empty, that we can make room for any sensations in the body to be just as they are. We can allow everything to be just as it is, without pushing against it or rejecting it in any way. We just allow it to be as much space as it needs to be just as it is. And in that spaciousness we find that we can observe with objectivity. And then we can let the tension go, and we can be at peace and at ease with the sensations in the body at any time. So now we'll move from the lower part of the back down into the sit bones and into the hips. We'll feel it moving throughout the pelvis. Again, just draw your awareness to the sensations, observing, letting tension go. And we move down into the thighs, bringing awareness to the top surface of both thighs and observing the sensations there, letting tension go. And we can rotate outward to the outside surface of the thighs, following that same process. And then moving to the underside of the thighs. And then moving once again to the inner surface of the thighs. From the top all the way down to the knee joint. And then from there we can begin to move awareness through the knee joints. Feel that flow of awareness, very soothing, very reassuring and pleasant. Moving through the knees down into the calves. Moving through the shins, we continue to observe that awareness as it flows downward, moving toward the ankles, through them, and into the feet. With awareness in the feet, we can observe the heels, the soles, the balls of the feet, and observe how the sensations are just slightly different here. Then moving around to the tops of the feet, and then finally bringing the awareness down into the toes and the toenails, and then with a patience and an attentiveness, just become aware of any sensations in the toenails. So you might notice that very subtle pulsation or vibration or energy. So we just observe, we remain objective, we remain interested. Now from the toes, let's bring our awareness once again up to the top of the head and to the area of the scalp. But this time at your own pace, you can just begin to guide your awareness back down through your body. But try to flow through each part one by one in about the same way that we did it, the same order, just so no part is forgotten or left out. And what you notice is in just a very brief moment, in one in-breath, you can observe the sensations in a part of the body. And in one out-breath, you can release the tension in that part of the body. And then you can move to the next place, repeat that process. Become aware of places in the body where you released the tension just a couple of minutes ago, and now you're discovering that it's returned. That tension has come back. And this is an example of one of the habit energies of the mind, where we habitually generate and hold tension in the body. And we do this as a response to difficult situations, painful emotions, things that cause us to worry or to be angry. We respond to those things by tensing up the body and then by holding tension in the body. But all the while, that tension is kind of replaying the negative emotions, the reactions to those negative emotions. So it's helpful to become aware and just release this tension over and over and over, as often as you notice it. And in so doing, you'll begin to establish a new habit energy in the mind, which is to meet tension with release. Meet tension with unconditional surrender. So move your awareness back through the body. Once you've had a chance to move through all the parts of the body, you can bring your awareness up to the base of the nose. And to begin with, we'll focus on the little patch of skin beneath the nostrils and above the upper lip. And then we can expand that awareness just a bit further to include the rings of the nostrils. And then we'll take it just a little further to include the nasal passages. So now we have this triangular area of the nose where we have awareness focused. And with awareness focused here, simply become aware of the movement of the breath in and out through the nose. So breathing in, just be aware that you're breathing in. Breathing out, just be aware that you're breathing out. Stay with the in-breath. Stay with the out-breath. Stay with the full duration of the in-breath. Staying with it as it begins and slows and pauses. And then it reverses direction and becomes the out-breath. Stay with the out-breath as it begins pauses, and then it becomes the next in-breath. So just remain aware of the breath, the full duration of the breath. And as you do, open up awareness to the touch of the breath, anywhere within that triangular area of the nose. You might notice that feeling of touch as the air passes through. And focusing on that, you can become aware of some of the subtleties of the touch. Like when you breathe in, the air feels a little cooler. And then when you breathe out, it feels a little warmer. When you breathe in, the air is a little drier. And when you breathe out, the air is a little more moist. So we just focus our awareness completely on the movement of the breath, the touch of the breath, and the sensations of the breath. Just focus. Remain aware. Sometimes as we focus on the breath, we'll find that the mind is distracted temporarily by different things. And it's important to be aware of distractions so that we can work with them in a skillful way. If you notice a distraction, say as a sound, maybe in the building or outside on the road, you notice this distraction. In the moment of noticing that, just guide your awareness back to the triangular area of your nose and to awareness of the breath. And you can just let go of the sounds that distract you. You can do it over and over each time that happens. But you're always doing it without generating any negativity. And in fact, it's a wonderful opportunity because becoming aware of our own distractions, we can begin to create a new habit energy, which is to let go of distractions and return to the breath. So following the breath a little longer, you might notice the mind wanders away to some physical sensation in the body. There might be a tickle or an itch, some sort of a feeling. Again, as soon as you notice the distraction, this is a very good thing. It's not a cause for anger. It is you noticing that the mind has wandered. And so you simply guide the awareness back to the breath. Once again, to the touch, to the movement of the breath, to the sensations of the breath. Stay aware. Reestablish awareness as often as you need to. Sometimes distraction comes in the form of the mind just kind of wandering, imagining things, images, remembering conversations, thinking of plans. And again, here too, in the moment of noticing, simply guide the awareness back to the breath, not generating any negativity, just noticing, using the opportunity to guide the awareness back to the breath, and letting go of the distractions. So we do this over and over in our practice, just letting go of every distraction, refocusing on the breath. So let's spend a few minutes doing this together in silence, just focusing on the breath, remaining aware, letting go of distractions. And in just a few minutes here, I'll sound the bell to end the meditation. your time. Take your time coming out of that. Feel free to stand up or move around. We'll take about a 1-minute break before we start the Dhamma talk. So there's tea in the kitchen. Help yourself if you want a cup of tea. And otherwise, just stand and stretch or get yourself some water, anything you'd like to for comfort. And then we'll begin. How did we do?
I don't know how you hold still that long. With the fidgeties.
Did ya?
No, I always do. I don't know if I know how to
That's pretty normal.
hold still.
You know, it just comes after a while.
Yeah.
Yeah, you know, it's not like every meditation gets easier or quieter, but just over a timeline in general, yeah, the fidgety goes away, some of the distractions go away. Some of the things that happen with the body, just sort of the discomfort, you know, can trigger some of that, and that starts to go away too. So it tends to just get quieter and quieter. But it's also good to be kind of aware of that. I mean, that's something that a lot of people experience but aren't really aware of it. And so it's helpful. I mean, noticing that is that's a product of the meditation. Noticing that you're distracted or noticing that you're fidgety.
When we were talking like the first time we laid down, and I'm like, I'm either gonna fall asleep or all my bones hurt. I couldn't get comfortable enough to just, relax.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Absolutely.
I suppose like everything,
Practice. Meg brought us some tea, so there's some more good stuff in there. Lemon tea.
I'm a licorice fan.
Let's see.
Chocolate.
Nice to have something warm too.
Want of tea?
Have that?
Yeah.
Thank you, Sherry.
My next trip.
Cedar lights are on, the cedar lights from racetrack.
Emily, but the tea was named after it.
Cedar Lake Tea Company?
Yeah.
Google that, or Facebook that.
Thank you.
Earl Grey, I'm out.
I like the red teas, the roses.
Thank you. Alrighty. So she did good with the meditation. Now she'll probably wander around a little bit, but she does well with the sit.
Yeah,
so,
she has.
So that's good. That's good. I had done, was in a long-term residential retreat doing the long, 10-hour days of meditation. And I had a couple of really clear, visions of her meditating with me. So it seems like, it's just kind of meant to be. So she does well with it. But, well, tonight I want to talk about what a koan is and how that can be used in practice, and some of this is kind of fun. One of the things I like about Zen teachings in general is that they have a little sense of humor to them. But there's also a lot of paradoxical statements that get you to think in a way that you might not normally do. So I find these particularly useful. There's one, Sensang, who was, I believe he was the 6th Zen patriarch. He said, "The great way is not difficult for those who have no preferences. When love and hate are both absent, everything becomes clear and undisguised. Make the smallest distinction, however, and heaven and earth are set infinitely apart." And for me, that was always a really powerful one because I felt like I understood that directly as soon as I read it. That when there's no preference, when I'm not thinking this is good and this is bad, then I'm just perfectly objective in that moment, experiencing whatever it is in that moment. And there's just clarity, perfect clarity. But when I decide, oh, that's a good thing and that's a bad thing, or this is a good person and this is a bad person, suddenly you've set up this duality, and heaven and earth, suffering and the absence of suffering, are set infinitely apart. So this is helpful to maybe just consider from time to time. When we're being objective, we're looking at things with the wisdom mind, and then in creeps that habit of judgment, or in creeps that habit of saying, this is good and this is evil. And then right away we notice that we've got this conflict in the mind, and that can be difficult. And this really happens to us every day in lots of different ways. Sometimes it's really subtle, simple, little things. Other times it's bigger things. We might be thinking about politics or what's going on. So just a helpful little parable. If you're interested, if you type in "The Great Way is Not Difficult" into Google, you will get probably about a 500-word essay from Sensang, the remainder of this talk, or the remainder of his discussion on the Great Way, and it's really quite wonderful. But this opening paragraph kind of captures the essence. So a little bit of a parable, a little bit of a koan in there, asking us to think about something. So in the Zen tradition, meditation students are often presented with a koan by their teacher. Koan is a question or a short statement that, when pondered until it is fully understood, provokes enlightenment. In many Zen settings, the master will give the student a koan and tell that student to work on that, and to come back maybe on a weekly basis and tell the teacher what they're thinking about that. What's the meaning of the koan? What's the answer? Some koans are really well known, so most people have heard them, like "What's the sound of one hand clapping?" That's one that's most of us have heard. There's another one that is pretty popular in Zen circles. Does a dog have Buddha nature? That's one that can be pondered. It's obscure to the general public, but Zen practitioners tend to know it. So one benefit of a koan is that it gives the meditator's mind something to chew on. I always like the quote from Gore Vidal, the late writer: "The unfed mind devours itself." And I think I have a mind which is probably leans towards that, towards devouring itself if I don't feed it something. So just something to be aware of. So the koan can help in that regard. It can give you something wholesome and helpful to focus on. So I kind of liken it to giving a dog a bone to chew on. If you give it that bone, it's going to go to a corner somewhere in the house and just sit and work on that bone tirelessly. And by giving the mind a question to ponder, it helps it to stay in one place and far less likely to wander around from thought to thought. So that's one of the things we deal with so often, is the monkey mind. The mind, or papancha is the Pali word, proliferation of thought. The mind jumps from one thought to the next, and it seems to be an endless cycle of moving through one thought after another, one idea after another. And oftentimes this can cause a real unsettlement in the mind of the meditator. So one koan for me that has been especially powerful in my practice is this one: "What is true without thought?" And I think this is a very deep and very powerful koan, because immediately this powerful question backs the meditator into a paradoxical corner. Because to ask the question is to fail to answer it, because you're right away thinking. You're thinking of an answer to what is true without thought. So, and this is what a lot of koans do. They create this paradox and they force us to deal with it. Okay, so I have this paradox. How do I answer a question like this without thinking about it? But the only way I can come up with the answer is to not think about it. So we kind of play with it. But this one is really powerful. The goal of the koan is not to elicit intellectual responses. You know, sometimes people will talk about it in a very intellectual way. They'll get into a conversation on it. And that's not really the purpose of these, however brilliant those responses might be. But the goal of the koan is to leave the mind with no other option than to experience the answer. And when you experience the answer to what is true without thought, everything gets very quiet, very fast, and suddenly you find yourself right there, right at the threshold of enlightenment. So to think about that, what is true if I'm not thinking? So sometimes think of the normal way that you process things. You're thinking about something and you're evaluating it. You're saying, this is good, this is bad, this is right, this is wrong, this is what I want, this is what I don't want. And so you're not really experiencing what is true in the present moment. You're experiencing your thoughts and ideas about what is true in the present moment. So by becoming aware of that, we just start to play with it a little bit. And sometimes you just get a real quick glimpse of that. Okay, if I let go of thought, what's true? And the answer is just this. It's just this. This is true. This is true. We use conditioned thinking to arrive at the unconditioned. So the answer to what is true without thought is unconditioned. It is an answer without prior conditioning of the mind. So we use concepts to arrive at non-conceptual awareness. We use language to explain what cannot be explained. A little parable from the gateless gate. Two monks were arguing about a flag. One said the flag is moving. The other said the wind is moving. The sixth Zen patriarch happened to be passing by, and he told them, not the wind, not the flag, mind is moving. And that's another interesting one to contemplate. I've thought about that one many times for prolonged periods, and thinking about how that is true. So to ask the question of the koan in a way that guides you more directly to the answer, I would preface it by saying that the habit of the mind is to think about and make up narratives explaining every conscious experience that we have. And so our experience then is not what is actually happening, but it is our ideas about what is happening, followed immediately by our reactions to those ideas. These ideas are the product of our own conditioning, but they also serve to condition the next set of ideas. And as I often say in this group here, this moment of consciousness sets the stage for the next moment of consciousness. Now, I had an experience, I've had similar experiences many times, but I had this experience this morning. And so I thought I'd share it with you because it's kind of germane to what we're talking about here. I had sent someone a text message, right? And because the older I get, the more I'm finding out that this is how we communicate. We don't call people, it's not acceptable. So we send text messages. And so I sent a text message just kind of checking in with the person about, kind of what's coming up for the holidays and so forth. And I was expecting to hear back right away, right? And I didn't hear anything for hour after hour after hour. And I find myself kind of starting to work with it, sort of coming up with I wonder why this person hasn't gotten back to me. I wonder, let me look at what I said. Did I say anything that may have upset them in some way? So I reread my text, and no, that looks all pretty good. And yeah, I see it went through. I know it went through, and so I started going through all this, and I was really starting to have this experience of kind of feeling some anxiety around this text that I had sent and why it was that this person hadn't sent this text back. And then you start to get a few ideas, that are just a little more, exotic. It's like, okay, well, what if this thing happened? Or, what if, what's going on? Do I need to send another text, or would that be weird? And so, and this was just my experience this morning, just absolutely true stuff. And so then I got a text back. It was at about 11:30, and the person got back to me and said, "Oh, I got up this morning. I went back to bed. I was so exhausted. I had slept poorly all last night, and I just woke up at 11:30." So, and so then they were responding to my text. But right away, I saw it happening, and I caught myself once again, even though I've been down this road 1,000 times before, it's still one of those deeply entrenched habits, which is, what's going on here?
And you think of the dumbest reasons.
And you think of the dumbest reasons. And they're usually reasons that make you feel worse about what's going on. So it's not like, oh, maybe something really great happened, and they're, they can't get to their phone because, something wonderful's happened, and they're counting a stack of money that they just got as a gift, or they're, it's usually about something maybe not so positive, and it's usually, the narrative usually comes back to us and how, I wonder what I did, I wonder what's wrong, I wonder what the problem is here. So again, just my personal example, and believe it or not, today isn't the first time that's happened to me. So I learned my lesson though. Well, I didn't learn my lesson, I received the lesson. Hopefully I learned it, and next time I won't feel this way. But interesting to see this happen, and part of me knew as this was going on, this is really silly, this is a waste of mental energy, you're just kind of torturing yourself. So then breaking it down into kind of the normal way of relating to events. Something unwanted happens, and it could be anything. Something unwanted, like expecting a text response sooner rather than later. That can be unwanted. Or, having some bad news, or finding about, someone's in ill health, or anything unwanted that happens. Usually there's a reaction to that. We react maybe with anger, or we react by saying, I wish that hadn't happened. I don't like this result, the way this turned out, or I'm angry about this, I can't believe it, I'm so upset, why did this have to happen? So something unwanted happens, and then we spend quite a bit of time personalizing it and turning it into all sorts of reasons about why we can suffer about what it is that happened. Then at some point, most of us, we get through that second part where all that reacting is taking on, and all that irrational thinking is taking on, and then we move to, okay, well, I gotta fix whatever this is and move on. So whatever the unwanted thing is, whether it's, I need to get the car fixed, or I need to go meet with this person where we had a disagreement, or, whatever it is, we go through all those kind of thoughts and worries. Again, papancha is that Pali word which means mental proliferation, the mind jumping from one thought to the next. And then we finally get to this stage where, okay, now I need to fix this, or I need to move on. And so we go into number 3. Sometimes it takes quite a while before we get there. So to think about this, step 2 is optional. Step 2 is also where all the suffering is. And so what if we could get rid of step 2? What if we were able to experience, oh, this is something that is difficult. This is something that is unpleasant. But rather than reacting with anger and a lot of that internal narrative, what if we were able to just move rather quickly into step 3? So this happened. What should I do about it? How can I take action skillfully in a way that doesn't cause any harm to anyone else? What can I do to fix this? Or, with a wisdom mind, is it really making the most sense to try and fix this, or is this something I need to just abandon and move on? And so sometimes abandoning and moving on is the skillful thing to do. So again, just think of that. Step 2 is optional. So next time this happens to you, think about that step 2 stuff. That's where the suffering is. If we could get rid of step 2, be a whole lot easier. Or what if we could decrease step 2 by just half? You know, you become aware and you kind of catch yourself. Oh yeah, you know, I'm really proliferating mentally with this. I'm really coming up with a lot of reasons to suffer around this. I'm noticing it now. I think I'll just call that done right there and move into the action part. You know, so there's a real practical approach for dealing with some of these things, and just noticing is the key. At some point, you have to notice. So, like what you were saying, Wendy, about noticing that you're fidgety, or noticing that it's difficult to sit still, or any of these kinds of things. It's not uncommon for meditators, especially new meditators, to think, okay, these are problems in the meditation. But again, this is actually wonderful, because it's I'm noticing this stuff. I'm noticing. And as soon as you notice, then you can start to do something with it. So, and to a degree, this is what is meant by acceptance, the term acceptance in Buddhism. It means not wasting your time or energy on what has already occurred, and it means not creating a lot of suffering in your own mind. But it means taking action in the moment with a mind that is filled with wisdom to do the thing that is best to solve that problem. So, and we find the wisdom mind. We discover the wisdom mind when we let the reactive mind quiet down and settle down. Or when we tell the reactive mind, no, you're going to calm down and settle down. What replaces it is the wisdom mind, and that's where we have the opportunity to change things for the better. So back to the question posed by the koan, what is true without thought? Now, what is true without thought? And if you close your eyes and you sort of, paradoxically, of course, you have to think about that. What is true without thought? And you think about it. Well, this. This moment unfolding right now is true. This is happening. This is your experience. Sometimes we think that there's a lot of things going on, but there's really just this. So when we think, oh, there's so much going on, well, that's your mind coming up with a whole list of things that might happen tomorrow and did happen earlier today, and thinking about the holidays and things. But what is true right now? In other words, what is the reality of the present moment and our experience in it? And that's a very peaceful thing to come upon. There's just this. There's sight, there's sound, there's smell, there's taste, there's touch, and there's thoughts. And so rather than feeling overwhelmed by kind of this tornado of all these things, all these imaginary things, what is true right now is this. That doesn't mean tomorrow won't be busy. It doesn't mean that Thursday won't have some challenges, but it means right now, this is what's true. Mindful awareness as it unfolds from moment to moment without having the mind add anything to it. But these words fall short of doing the question justice. You just have to feel it. You have to experience it for yourself. The distinction between subject and object begins to blur until finally there's no longer any distinction at all. There is no one there who is having the experience. There's just the experience. So try working with that a little bit. Again, with eyes closed, letting go of the ideas about being here and kind of what this means and what it represents and the other people that are in here, letting go of that. What is the experience in the present moment? Without, is this good? Is this bad? How do I look in all this? Am I understanding this properly? It's letting go of all that and just saying what is true without any of that thought stuff. And then you feel the real peace and stability of the body. That's there. The real quiet wisdom of the mind. That's there. When we're not covering it up with layer upon layer of made up stuff. So it's really a beautiful thing to just experience that. The truth without thought. Alan Watts, quote by him that I like, "A man who spends all his time thinking has nothing to think about but his thoughts." Anybody ever have that happen? I do that pretty regularly too. The awareness is the key. We still have the same human, tendency to do these things, the same habits of the mind. I think the difference for the meditator is that we become aware of it a little sooner, and then we're able to work with it in a skillful way, in a way that sets us free. When you work with this koan, you become the answer. You become the answer. Then you might ask yourself the question, well, do I have any problems? Because one of the things that comes to me when I am not experiencing what is true without thought, then it means I'm experiencing what is with thought. And so what is with thought is, bills coming up, health issues, interpersonal relationships, a lot of things that we call problems, a lot of things that we think are going to be difficult and are going to cause us to suffer in our own lives. So you can ask yourself, do I have any problems right now if I'm not thinking about something and adding it to my experience? So like right now, and most of us, there's no existential threat, there's nothing happening here that's causing us to have to worry or flee or fight. This moment is peaceful, calm, pleasant. This is what's true without thought. And so, do you have problems right now? And you realize the only way you can say yes to that is if you add thought to the present moment. Because that's what the problem is going to be. The thought. So, The capital T truth exists independent from thought. And your problems right at this moment are thoughts. Then do you really have any problems? Not unless you're willing to think about them. And here's a quote from the Tao Te Ching. When people see some things as beautiful, other things become ugly. When people see some things as good, other things become bad. Being and non-being create each other. Difficult and easy support each other. High and low depend on each other. Before and after follow each other. So that's a beautiful rendering. Stephen Mitchell translation of the Tao Te Ching. I think that might be my favorite translation of the Tao Te Ching. It's probably the most common, readily available. So, although I do have a beautiful copy of the Tao Te Ching in Tibetan with English also, my son, he spent several months at a monastery, Tibetan monastery called Ratnaling out in kind of north of Berkeley, California. And when he was out there, one of the things that this monastery does is they print books in the Tibetan language, and they ship them back to India and Nepal and to areas where there are a lot of Tibetans. And so he worked in the book binding department, putting these books together and printing them, and it was very neat to receive one of those from him. So, wonderful things to think about. Anybody have any thoughts or questions or anything on that? There's some other things I'll share with you.
So I have a question, Ken.
Yeah.
So, does Buddhism have a explanation for, like you talked about how when we, perceive a problem or think we have problems, generally, in relating your story with the text, automatically we seem conditioned to go negative with everything, even though paradoxically we don't enjoy living in the negative. We prefer to live in good things and have good thoughts, but why do we seemingly do it to ourselves constantly and make ourselves suffer when we could just as easily choose to go the other way? Is there like a Buddhist way of explaining that, or what's your take on why it happens that way as opposed to being good?
That's a really good question.
Yeah,
Just one quick quote from the Dalai Lama that comes up. He said, if science ever proves any part of Buddhism to be incorrect, then Buddhism will have to change. I like that. He's saying, this is a living thing. It's ongoing and it's dynamic. What I usually attribute this to is that human beings, behavioral scientists tell us that we have what's called a negativity bias, and that it's built into us over the course of millions of years of evolution. And I had done some reading on this quite a while ago, but I actually picked up a book, new book, Why Buddhism is True by Robert Wright. It's kind of a popular book right now. I think it's on the New York Times bestseller list. Anyway, reading through this, he's a behavioral scientist, and so he's talking about what is wired into us. And so the person who is most likely going to be able to pass on their genes to the next generation, keep their DNA going, is the person that is identifying threats and responding to those quicker than other people. So the idea is that this stuff is kind of wired into us, this negativity bias, as that's what we're going to focus on first. Because, for example, there can be a beautiful flower in your garden, and there can be something that looks like a snake in your garden. Missing the flower is not going to cause you to be killed, but missing the snake might. You know, so this is the way the brain is wired, is to always go for the, you know, what's kind of the
What's
worst
the
case
threat?
scenario. Yeah.
What's the threat?
Exactly.
So you can
So
survive. And
right. So nobody ever died by not paying attention to the beautiful flower, you know. So, and I really think that's true, is that has become the habit energy of the mind just over years and years and years for each one of us, and certainly the evolutionary aspect of it, that we're just sort of programmed to see the negativity. So to become aware of that, you know, through mindfulness, then we start to change that. And I think something really interesting has happened over the past 2,000 years in that, you know, just the way our society has become more civilized, there's safety, comparatively, there's laws. I mean, for the most part, we're all much more safe and secure than we would have been 2,000 years ago, or a million years ago, certainly. And so now we're dealing with these big fight or flight brains, these, you know, all of these instincts that have been built into us through all these years of evolution, and now, you know, they don't apply so well to Kim Kardashian did this or that today, or, you know what I mean? It's like, yeah, what do you do with all this? It's not really necessarily a good fit for it. So what we do is, through awareness of that, is we start to change the habit energy of the mind. We start to change it intentionally through practice, and that really makes a difference. So for me, I mean, there was once a time where I was in the business world, and you know, so I tended to look at things with, you know, always trying to protect my interests, always trying to look for the potential, who's the person that's trying to, you know, get ahead of me, you know, different things like this, and always feeling, you know, just kind of negative and unpleasant as a result of that. Over time and practice, the default has gone more to, oh, look at this person, you know, seems like a nice person, not noticing the negative stuff that so often other people notice. Sometimes I'm pleasantly surprised. I'll be driving with somebody and they'll say, did you just see that? Did you see the look that guy gave you? Or did you see what he did just then? And it's like, no, I didn't notice. You know, I wasn't looking. I'm not scanning for that stuff anymore. I'm scanning for something different. One of the 4 Brahma Viharas is appreciative joy, which is where we start to look at things that happen around us, and we sort of, it's almost like alchemy. We're pulling joy out of all these different situations, taking that and using it as something that we can work with. You know, and I have a lot of just very simple things. I'll just see maybe a couple walking into the supermarket, and they just happen to hold hands, you know. Or today I saw what must have been a father and a son based on age difference, but these 2 guys had the exact same body type. They were both each carrying 1 propane tank, probably to cook their turkey with, coming up here. But I just noticed how, in a split second, how these 2 men moved exactly identical to each other. It looked like they were the mirror image of each other, the same body and same thing. And so I looked at that and I just thought, well, that's kind of neat. You know, that's sort of a wonderful thing. I mean, you know, so you start to train the mind to look for reasons to be joyful, sources of joy. And the wider we expand that circle of joy, you know, the more there is for us to work with. Because for most of us, the circle of joy, it's kind of like, well, me and maybe my partner and maybe my immediate family, you know, and maybe it extends out a little further. But the further those ripples go, the good things that happen to other people have less and less of an impact on us. You know what I mean? Like, so if the guy in New Jersey wins the lottery tomorrow, how good are you going to feel about that? You know? So it's like not very much. So we intentionally, through the practice, start to expand that circle of joy where, things that happen to other people, even though we don't know them, we start to take that on as our own joy, and it's very helpful.
I have a question. So with family coming together over the next weekend here, how do you handle deflection of negativity? Or how is it, what's appropriate to just kind of, the one word is squash it, but because Troy and I were just talking about, like, I need more joy. This week I was just saying, I need more joy, I want this, I want to do that. We've been making some Christmas concert and plans and stuff, but how do we squash negativity that kind of creeps in unexpectedly, or, dealing with a lot of family, there's a lot of different personality dynamics and stuff. What is your take on squashing the negative?
What I usually try and do is cultivate, whether it's compassion, where, if I'm looking at somebody or talking to somebody in the family who's really upset about some political issue, say, and let's say they're kind of diametrically opposed to me, sometimes that can be difficult to cultivate compassion, but if you kind of look through to, well, what is the fear that this person has, maybe you can talk to them from that perspective, that, it's really scary when we don't know what's going to happen, or if we think we think things are changing in the country in a way that's going to affect us badly, and so, we can create some compassion around that, and then that tends to sort of open the barriers enough that, you can almost just kind of neutralize the energy of that, whatever that thing is, and then just kind of leave it there and walk away, or maybe you can cultivate reasons to be joyful around something else. But it's not uncommon for me to just kind of extricate myself from those situations. If I got a couple of people talking about, something they saw on Fox News, just go to the other room, and just disengage myself. We don't have to take the bait each and every time.
Good
So,
point.
I don't know if that helps. But one thing, and this kind of leads nicely into what I wanted to do here. I think, I've been thinking a lot about gratitude, and, I'm a person who I owe gratitude to so many people, for so many different reasons in my life. And so I'll think about that gratitude, and that warms my heart. But I always come up with this interesting thought that the flip side, if gratitude is a coin, the flip side of gratitude is forgiveness. And that is one of the most powerful things we can bring to these interpersonal relationships where we're experiencing difficulty like that. And so, knowing that many of us are going to be involved in some family dynamics that could be challenging in the next couple of days, I wanted to share this practice on forgiveness and just do it as a guided meditation as our closing. So we have a few minutes left so that we can do this. This is a practice, it's called the 3 Directions of Forgiveness, and this is as taught by Jack Kornfield, which many of you are familiar with. Meg, I know you are.
Who has a voice that sounds just like you.
Which I appreciate very much.
Yeah.
Very much appreciate that. So, but this is one of his teachings on forgiveness, and I consider it just really beautiful, and I think it's such a healthy and loving way to go into the holidays with forgiveness on your mind. Helps with gratitude, helps you tolerate your weird uncle and his strange political views, and you know what I'm talking about. So forgiveness. There are 3 directions of forgiveness, and I'll just guide us through this. I'll say all the words, and what I'd ask is that you would just close your eyes, kind of open up your heart, and just let these words speak for you as I recite them, and just let yourself feel them. Let yourself feel how beautiful forgiveness is, and how the energy of forgiveness is so much like gratitude and so much like love. And so we begin with the first direction of forgiveness. And in this, we recognize that there are many ways in which I have hurt or harmed others. So we're recognizing this in ourselves. There are many ways in which I have hurt or harmed others, betrayed or abandoned them. I remember these now. And so let yourself remember and feel the sorrows which you carry from betraying or harming others. There are so many ways that each of us in our lives have harmed others knowingly and unknowingly, betrayed, abandoned, hurt. I remember these now, and I feel in my body that which I carry. And so let the images come. Let the pictures come, the memories come of those experiences. In the many ways that I have hurt or harmed you, knowingly or unknowingly, out of my pain, out of my fear, out of my anger, confusion, and hurt, I remember these now, and I ask your forgiveness. I ask your forgiveness. Please forgive me. And then let yourself feel the work of forgiveness in the heart, how it wants to be done, however many people and circumstances still require that you ask their forgiveness, that you inwardly bow to them and ask for their kindness, and ask, forgive me. And then we move to the second direction of forgiveness. Just as I have hurt and harmed others, knowingly and unknowingly, so I have also harmed myself, betrayed and abandoned myself. Just as I have caused suffering to others, I have caused suffering to this one here, myself, abandoned, hurt. Again, let yourself remember these now. The ways that you've betrayed yourself, the harm or suffering that you may have caused yourself. Picture it, feel it too, just now as you breathe gently and sit. There are so many ways that we have abandoned ourselves, hurt ourselves out of our own pain and fear, out of our own confusion and hurt. And in this moment, as you remember, offer yourself forgiveness. I forgive myself. Hold yourself with the tenderness and mercy of a child. I've tried so hard in this life, and for all of the ways I have hurt or harmed myself out of my own fear and confusion and pain, I forgive myself. I offer myself forgiveness. And now we move to the third direction of forgiveness. There are many ways that others have hurt and harmed me in this life. Betrayed, abandoned, caused suffering knowingly and unknowingly. Each of us has experienced this many times from others. I remember these now too. Let yourself remember and feel the sorrows that you carry. In so many ways, others have hurt and harmed me, betrayed and caused pain. I remember these now, and sensing them and how the others have hurt me out of their pain, out of their confusion, out of their fear and anger and hurt. In this moment, to the extent that I am ready, I offer you too forgiveness. I turn my heart in the direction of forgiveness. In this moment, to the extent that I am able, I forgive you. I release you. I forgive you. Now rest gently in the breath of the heart. Let yourself feel the relief, the natural blessing that comes when forgiveness is possible, the renewal, the ease, the tenderness. Forgiveness makes the heart clear and open. So just rest with that for a moment. Those very beautiful words of forgiveness. Forgiving others, asking others for forgiveness, forgiving ourselves for the hurt we have caused ourselves. And then we're up at the end of our time here together, so what I want to do is close with the 4 Brahma-viharas. So if we stay with our eyes closed, with our hearts open, we'll go through the 4 Brahma-viharas. Again, I'll say these words for you. You can just let them speak for you to the extent that you're comfortable. Recognizing the suffering that exists in the world, we say, may all beings be free from suffering and from the causes of suffering. And may all beings be surrounded by love and kindness. May all beings be joyful and happy. And may all beings be equanimous, free and peaceful, free of craving, free of aversion, free of clinging. And may all of you sharing this room with me tonight, this very precious time, may you all be truly, truly happy. Thank you all so very much for coming, being a part of this wonderful night.
Thank you.
Blessings to everybody. Thank you, thank you. Thank you, thank you.
Thank you, Tim.
You bet. Thanks for being here. And out there on that table, you probably all noticed, but there's different